Hey everyone, so some of you may remember my relatively recent demolition of James Tour and his anti-science antics in the realm of origin of life research. Well, as I briefly touched upon in that content, James is a darling of a particular organization called the Discovery Institute, an evangelical propaganda mill that is somewhat influential in creationist circles. While they promote themselves as a think tank with a roster of credible scientists, the DI is nothing more than an effort to push for creation science, or intelligent design, to be taught in schools alongside evolutionary biology. Since this can't be validated as real science, as it does not explain or predict anything, their strategy is to try to invalidate the evolutionary paradigm in the hopes that this will convince people to adopt their alternative worldview, or more accurately, to retain a worldview that has been rendered obsolete. Of course, science does not work this way, as theories do not die and leave a vacuum to be occupied by whatever shouts the loudest. They are rather replaced by newer, better theories with greater explanatory power, as has been seen many times in the history of science. Moreover, far from actually highlighting any kind of alleged shortcomings of evolutionary biology, the DI merely presents lies and propaganda. A thorough analysis of this propaganda is warranted, and that will be the main goal of this series. In order to do this, I will be targeting their primary contributors one at a time, going through their claims and highlighting their abject fraudulence. The subject of this video will be a fellow named Casey Luskin, and it will be centered around a specific claim he made in a recent video from October 2021. Now, for those of you who are already fuming with rage and on your way to tell me off in the comments, I would advise you to muster up the courage to actually watch this video. It is my intention to get through to some percentage of you, and whether you want to accept it or not, these criticisms are well deserved. James brought it upon himself with his toxic and infantile behavior, and you will see that Casey has as well, due to the utterly transparent slander he has committed. Let's get started. So the DI video in question is Human Evolution, the Monkey Bias, part of a series called Science Uprising. Here's a taste.
Modified monkeys? Is that what we are? Or is it just a mask some scientists want us to wear? Materialists seem intent on proving we evolved from ape-like ancestors. But is this really objective science? Let's take a look at the evidence.
The joke here is not so much that they are pretending to be interested in science, but more so that they are pushing a narrative that the legitimate scientific community is like the agents in the Matrix, and this ragtag squad of rebels is going to tear down the system by speaking truth to power. That's why the narrator is wearing a mask reminiscent of the hacker group Anonymous, meant to convey the sentiment that real science is corrupt and evil, hence the pending revolution. The video is even edited with adorable little fake glitches for maximum subliminal effect. So what is the main thesis of the video? Well, like any other creationist propaganda, the point is to take some well-established science, which discredits the archaic notion that humans were created by a deity precisely as we are, rather than having evolved over millions of years, and lie about it to trick the viewer into rejecting science. In this case, that would be the overwhelming evidence supporting the evolution of Homo sapiens from other hominid species. This is something that is well understood by every single anthropologist and evolutionary biologist in the world, and is not controversial in the slightest. So the only approach toward poking holes in this rock-solid science is dishonesty and misrepresentation. Doing the honors here is Casey Luskin, the Associate Director of the Center for Science and Culture at the DI. What's his background, you ask?
Dr. Casey Luskin, co-author of Science and Human Origins, shares his insight.
Ah, he wrote a book. They don't let just anyone write a book, so he must be smart. Oh, and he has a PhD in geology, which has nothing to do with evolutionary biology or anthropology, making his expertise totally irrelevant to this topic. In searching for published research, I find only one article in which he is the primary author about cratons, which is geology, and literally anyone can write a book or a bunch of blog posts about anything without having to know anything or be right at all. Okay, let's hear what some guy who knows nothing about fossils has to say about fossils.
The fossil evidence for human evolution is extremely weak. I would say that the case for human evolution is driven more by an undying belief in materialist ideology than it is actual hard evidence.
So, right from the get go, we are establishing both the overarching lie and the agenda. Human evolution is based on mountains of evidence, which is desperately rejected by creationist ideology. That's why he has to drag science down to his level and call it materialist ideology. Just to quickly elucidate this tactic before getting to his lies, the DI folks use materialism as a dirty word because the targets of their propaganda believe in souls, which are a supernatural concept, so they complain that any philosophy which does not celebrate the existence of the soul is evil. Well, science is the study of the physical world, so science is inherently materialistic. Science is materialism. Anyone who says otherwise does not know what science is. The DI folks back themselves into a corner by pretending to be pro-science while rejecting literally all of science. The reason evolution is science and intelligent design is not is prediction prior to investigation. Evolutionary biology predicted that the human form should emerge slowly through geologic time from a basal hominid form. It's a prediction about what we should find upon investigating, just like we do in geology or astronomy or any other field. It's how science works. And when we investigated, we did indeed find this slow morphologic change. The anatomically modern human morphology emerges slowly over 7 million years through over 24 species and thousands of individual specimens from our last common ancestry with chimpanzees. These species that act as missing links, which have been uncovered over the centuries, show incontrovertibly the evolutionary history of Homo sapiens from the rather unassuming Miocene apes. Given how many hominin species are known and the transitional morphologies they display, the entire field of biological anthropology must somehow be called into question.
The illustrations and drawings of these missing links are often highly speculative.
To the creationist, there can only be what we see today. There are apes and there are humans, and nothing in between. Of course, the word apes simply means members of the family Hominidae, so this is a bit like saying that there are only canines and dogs, and nothing in between. It doesn't actually make sense. But of course, what they mean is that humans are a special creature made by a deity precisely as we are, and that there are no transitional species. Therefore, anything science labels a transitional species must be either a fully human hominin or a just an ape hominin. So Homo erectus was fully human, Australopithecus afarensis was just apes, and so forth. They must pretend that all of these fossils are either humans or apes, even though the science very clearly says otherwise. Rather humorously, they can't even agree on the distinction, as certain transitional species get labeled as apes by one creationist organization, like Answers in Genesis, and as humans by another, like the DI. But beyond this confusion, they also just flat out distort what science says.
Quite a few paleoanthropologists think that Neanderthals buried their dead, that they have been discovered with signs of high intelligence, including art and culture. So although many artist impressions will depict Neanderthals as very primitive, if a Neanderthal were to walk in the door right now, you would not be able to distinguish them most likely from a modern human being.
Well, yeah, Homo neanderthalensis lived concurrently with Homo sapiens, and we did not evolve from them. In fact, it wasn't until we left Africa that we encountered them in Eurasia and either outcompeted them or killed them. Luskin is pretending that science proposes we evolved from Neanderthals. It doesn't. But let's get to the main act. The primary target of the video is Lucy, the famous set of fossils belonging to a member of Australopithecus afarensis, one of many important intermediary species. The DI needs to convince the viewer that it is really just an ape. The centerpiece of this campaign is a PBS Nova documentary from 1994 called In Search of Human Origins. Featured within is an anthropologist named Owen Lovejoy. Let's check out a bold accusation made by Luskin and pals.
This PBS documentary shows anthropologist Owen Lovejoy manipulating the fossils to make Lucy walk upright.
The perfect fit was an illusion that made Lucy's hip bones seem to flare out like a chimp's. But all was not lost. As a result, the angle of the hip looks nothing like a chimp's, but a lot like ours.
So we can see them showing Dr. Lovejoy using a power tool to grind away at what is implied to be the actual pelvis bone of Lucy, with one onlooker viewing this in complete shock as to the dishonesty. They are making it appear as though the hip bone was that of a chimp and Lovejoy manipulated it to seem like that of a human. You know, like a fraud. Luskin reiterates this accusation himself.
And so when Lucy's pelvis had to be reconstructed using quite a bit of evolutionary interpretation and imagination.
Clear as day, big fat fraud. Now let's look at some parts of the documentary that Luskin conveniently decided to omit, narrated by Donald Johanson, who discovered Lucy in 1974.
As Lovejoy pointed out, the joint had all the hallmarks of a creature that moved around on two legs, not on all fours. Walking upright is something that only humans can do, and it needs a special kind of knee joint. One that can be locked straight. A chimp gets around on all fours. If it tries to walk upright, its knee joint doesn't lock. It's forced to walk with a bent leg, and that's tiring.
So we are establishing that a lockable knee joint is needed for walking upright, which Lucy and similar organisms all had, and modern apes do not have. The DI avoids even mentioning knee joints at all, which represent a crucial detail. Now for the more important bit.
Here was the skeleton of a creature that looked like it could walk like us, but with many ape-like features. The ape that stood up, it was a revolutionary idea. We needed Owen Lovejoy's expertise again, because the evidence wasn't quite adding up. The knee looked human, but the shape of her hip didn't. Superficially, her hip resembled a chimpanzee's, which meant that Lucy couldn't possibly have walked like a modern human. But Lovejoy noticed something odd about the way the bones had been fossilized.
When I put the two parts of the pelvis together that we had, this part of the pelvis has pressed so hard and so completely into this one that it caused it to be broken into a series of individual pieces which were then fused together in later fossilization.
After Lucy died, some of her bones lying in the mud must have been crushed or broken, perhaps by animals browsing at the lakeshore.
This has caused the two bones, in fact, to fit together so well that they're in an anatomically impossible position.
If this is not clear, what they are saying is that a part of the pelvis had been shattered and fused into an unnatural geometry that made motion anatomically impossible and was not reflective of Lucy's true anatomy. Let's see what they decided to do about it.
The perfect fit was an illusion that made Lucy's hip bones seem to flare out like a chimp's. But all was not lost. Lovejoy decided he could restore the pelvis to its natural shape. He didn't want to tamper with the original, so he made a copy in plaster. He cut the damaged pieces out and put them back together the way they were before Lucy died. It was a tricky job, but after taking the kink out of the pelvis, it all fit together perfectly, like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. As a result, the angle of the hip looks nothing like a chimp's, but a lot like ours. Anatomically, at least, Lucy could stand like a human. The case for our earliest ancestor walking upright was growing stronger, and Lucy wasn't the only evidence.
And there it is. Lovejoy was doing absolutely nothing whatsoever to the fossils. He made a copy in plaster in order to further investigate their arrangement and mechanics due to the original sample having been shattered and fused in an unnatural way. And when finished, the hip matched the knee, both indicating that Lucy walked upright. In case you missed it, let's play those key bits one more time.
This PBS documentary shows anthropologist Owen Lovejoy manipulating the fossils to make Lucy walk upright.
He didn't want to tamper with the original, so he made a copy in plaster. He cut the damaged pieces out and put them back together the way they were before Lucy died.
There is no getting around this. Luskin and the DI lied, and they lied hard. They deliberately misrepresented the Nova doc. They literally play the exact clip where the narration says that he is manipulating a plaster copy and simply omit the audio, while accusing him of manipulating the fossil itself in order to deviously make a quadruped appear like a biped because of his evil materialist agenda. To make it as clear as possible, just look at the transcript for the portion they played. Now let's restore what they cut out. As you can see, Lovejoy isn't the only one cutting pieces out. Again, there is no mention from the DI of the lockable knee joint, which is a crucial detail that made Lovejoy suspicious of the pelvis in the first place, since a knee for walking upright and a pelvis for walking on all fours do not go together. Luskin then omitted that Lovejoy noticed the pelvis was broken into a series of individual pieces, which were then fused together in later fossilization. He deliberately left out these crucial details, which explain what Lovejoy was actually doing and why, and in this way, Luskin and the DI have committed slander. This is a criminal offense worthy of a lawsuit. There is no denying this. You don't have to understand an ounce of science. It is clear as day that this is textbook manipulation. The DI knows that nobody watching their video will go and look for the Novadoc or its easily Googleable transcript to get more context or verify these claims. They know that any creationist watching will just believe them at face value, but anyone with a shred of honesty can now see the reality of the situation. It is a premeditated lie. Folks at the DI sat down and deliberated over how they could lie in order to most effectively cast doubt on empirical science substantiating intermediary species between apes that walk on all fours and humans that walk upright. What does Dr. Lovejoy think of all this? Perhaps he has a comment. Indeed he does. I have rarely seen such colossal dishonesty in any film or video that I have ever seen. It's amazing but terribly disheartening for the future of science that there are organized groups dispensing such trash. Sincerely, Owen. Unfortunately, the dishonesty doesn't end there. Luskin is hell-bent on misrepresenting not only PBS and Lovejoy, but other related research. In the video, Luskin complains that Lucy's feet were never recovered, but are shown as human-like in restorations.
They did not even find feet associated with Lucy's skeleton. She's almost always depicted as an upright walking, ape-like species.
What he completely ignores are human-like footprints called the Laetoli footprints that were attributed to her taxon, the Australopithecines. He also ignores the foot material from STW 573, another member of Australopithecus afarensis that is nearly a complete skeleton. This specimen is colloquially known as Littlefoot and presents the same bipedal traits as Lucy, or AL2881. Are you curious what these numbers are for? They are necessary because there are thousands of specimens making up over 300 individuals in the genus, including 4 other species: skulls, vertebrae, phalanges, long bones, and more. Luskin complains about Lucy like it's the only one, which again can only be dishonesty or profound ignorance. All of these Australopithecine specimens possess a suite of characteristics that not only make them efficient bipeds, but made it biomechanically impossible for them to be anything else. The bowl-shaped pelvis and lockable knee we mentioned, a valgus knee for holding their weight, an inline big toe and 3 arches like humans, an anteriorly located foramen magnum, positioning the vertebral column directly underneath, thereby demanding upright posture. The evidence is conclusive. But when you want to pretend no evidence exists for something, you can always just ignore the mountain of existing evidence, I suppose. Luskin then referred to a 2000 article in the journal Nature, From Forelimbs to 2 Legs, by Collard and Aiello, which he claimed referred to Lucy as a knuckle walker. He said this:
In fact, an article in the journal Nature studied the hand bones of Lucy and found that she had the knuckles of a knuckle walker.
As you can see, he said this while showing a bit of the actual text of the article, which he highlighted as saying, "These features are thought to be associated with knuckle walking, seemingly in line with their desire to portray Lucy as an ape." Now, does this article say what he claims it is saying? Not by a long shot. If you actually read the paper, which is only 1.5 pages, it is not making the case that A. afarensis was a quadruped. These 2 paragraphs literally begin with the phrase, "The basic facts are not in dispute." A. afarensis has a combination of traits not seen among living primates. They have human-like features, like the foot, big toe, and pelvis, and features more familiar to Miocene apes, like the fingers, arms, and chest. Then it outlines the true discussion as to whether the ape-like features are non-functional retentions from ancestral species, or whether the ape-like traits are functionally important, and a mixed locomotor repertoire was utilized due to the importance of getting around in trees. It then goes on to specify that the study this article is referencing favors the former, which is literally the precise opposite of the conclusion Luskin claims it is making. It's funny, I'm not an anthropologist, and I was able to understand this paper just fine. Why do you think Luskin botched it so badly? Is he a complete moron, or was he deliberately obfuscating the contents of the article? Also, this article is referencing a study by Richmond and Straight that is found in the very same issue of this journal. Why did he not cite that one? He merely showcased text from a preliminary article from 4 limbs to 2 legs in News and Views that was introducing the main paper, evidence that humans evolved from a knuckle-walking ancestor. This paper is full of anatomical terminology that is a little dense, although fascinating, but it clearly concludes that the knuckle-walking features, if present at all, represent a synapomorphy of the African ape and human clade. Since that sentence might not mean much to most people, let's see how this paper was summarized by Henry G. in his supplement, These Fists Were Made for Walking, where he said, "Richmond and Straight have looked at the wrist bones of 2 extinct members of the human family, Australopithecus anamensis from Kenya and Australopithecus afarensis, the famous Lucy skeleton from Ethiopia, as they report in Nature. Both, for example, were bipeds. They walked as upright as you or I, and probably not on their knuckles. It is also in agreement with Collard and Aiello that the knuckle-walking features are relics of organisms that were common ancestors of African apes and humans." Why didn't Luskin quote any of that? I think I know. What do we call this deceptive tactic? Dr. Richmond was asked if Luskin was correct in his summary of the paper that an article in the journal Nature studied the hand bones of Lucy and found that she had the hand bones of a knuckle walker. He replied, "Wow, yes, Luskin's comment is a flagrant mischaracterization of our scientific results. Lucy did not have the hands of an active knuckle walker. Rather, there is evidence from her anatomy that her ancestors seemed to have had knuckle walking adaptations." If it isn't abundantly clear by now that Luskin's video was a bogus hit piece, I don't know what else to tell you. And this is not an isolated occurrence. This is the modus operandi of the Discovery Institute. This is what they do. I pointed this out numerous times in my response to James. With him, there was the blatant quote mine of Matthew Powner, the complete misrepresentation of Donna Blackman, the faster-than-light-speed cutoff of Lee Cronin, and the bald-faced lies about Jack Shostak, just to name a few. Luskin uses precisely the same tactics. These charlatans have no ability to discredit the science that invalidates their archaic worldview, so they have to lie about it. This is not mere stupidity. It is deliberate and malicious dishonesty. This is all you really need to know about Casey Luskin. He's a dime a dozen apologist preaching outside of his field and lying through his teeth, consistently and repeatedly. Again, anyone who merely cites his degree status as a reason to believe what he's saying is a moron. A PhD in geology does not qualify one to talk about anthropology or any other field but geology. It is simply that creationist propaganda mills have so few PhD holders at their disposal that they have to spread them paper thin and present them as authorities in field they have zero training in. So to anyone desperately playing the qualifications game in the comments section, save your breath. Casey and I are equally qualified in anthropology, and that is not at all qualified. The difference is that he lies about it, and I don't. People who actually care about degree status would listen to the tens of thousands of working anthropologists with doctorates actively publishing research in the field, who unanimously agree on the descent of modern primates like humans from a common ancestor. If degrees matter, then those tens of thousands of degrees in the field are incomparably more valuable than Casey's one degree in an unrelated field. What's that? Their degrees don't matter? Then guess what? Neither does his, or any other this one guy from Harvard they try to throw at you. You can't play it both ways. This imbalance in credibility is a huge problem for the DI, so they have to somehow cast doubt on the entire scientific community in one fell swoop. And of course their angle is corruption. Casey himself complains on his website about the academic censorship of Darwinian critics. This is totally idiotic. There is no censorship in science. Science is not dogma. Religion is dogma. So creationists have to project dogmatism onto science to try to level the playing field. In reality, practically everyone in science is trying to prove something wrong. That's how science works. Unlike ancient religious scripture, in science nothing is sacred. If you prove a pillar of science to be incorrect, you get a Nobel Prize. This is what makes their script so ridiculous. There is no censorship of flat earthers in the scientific community either, because flat earth is not science. Intelligent design also is not science. It's religion trying to Trojan horse its way into science. That's why real scientists reject it, not because of some imaginary materialist agenda, which again, in actuality is just a synonym for doing science. These empty mischaracterizations are yet another strategy of the DI. Too much science proving you wrong? Do what James Tour does. Just call it hype and walk away. It's a tactic that allows them to dismiss legitimate science without actually doing anything whatsoever to address that science. Not surprisingly, Casey uses this word too.
And let's talk about some of these early hominins and some of the hype that has gone on surrounding them.
They can cast doubt with just one word, and people who want them to be right will eat it up. They might as well just point at a journal article and say, "This science sucks," and watch their congregation nod their heads in mindless approval. It gets more subtle than these overt accusations as well. You have to look at the language they choose to use. There is a reason they are constantly using words like Darwinism and evolutionism. First of all, evolutionism is not a real word. It was invented by creationist propagandists. It is an attempt to liken well-established empirical science to a faith-based belief system by giving it the suffix ism. Creationism, evolutionism, scientism, take your pick. A desperate attempt to claim equal footing. With the word Darwinism, it's even more dishonest. The point of using this word is to pretend that the entire field of evolutionary biology is nothing more than the utterances of a single prophet, Charles Darwin, as though if one man can somehow be discredited, 200 years of biology would suddenly be turned on its head. This is insane. When Darwin was alive, humans were barely aware that molecules exist, let alone biomolecules like DNA. Modern biology and genetics would be unrecognizable gibberish to Darwin, and it does not rely on his work in the slightest, but rather rests on the laurels of modern research performed by hundreds of thousands of scientists all over the world. Darwin is just one of many great figures in the history of science who contributed to its advancement, just as so many have since him. It is not evolutionism. It is not Darwinism. It is not religious scripture to be taken on blind faith like the scripture the DI covertly upholds. It's called evolutionary biology, and it is a vibrant scientific field with contributors from countries all over the world working in numerous capacities and even of varying religious faiths. Just not the science-denying kinds. It's simply that the science deniers in the DI like to pretend they aren't science deniers. That's why they need that buzzword, materialism.
Science does not need humans to share a common ancestor with monkeys. Materialism does. We are not materialists. We see the human soul. We experience love. We live with purpose. We fight for justice. We are the quiet majority, and we will be quiet no longer.
Well, all kinds of animals exhibit love and other complex emotions, and even enact simple justice systems by which peers can be praised, punished, or expelled from a community. So this script is stupid. Vervet monkeys punish liars who sound the predator alarm in order to feed first, something referred to by some as proto-morality. Chimpanzees comfort and console one another and even mourn their dead. They are political animals who, like humans, utilize coalitions to overthrow leaders, make alliances, and carry out revenge. Of course, with animals, they say these behaviors are instinctive or genetic, but for some reason, humans can't exhibit this same behavior without a soul. Why all this focus on souls? Well, it's the easiest way to manipulate any Christian, because fear of mortality is the oldest fear in the book. Remind people that they're afraid to die, but disguise it as a clarion call, and you can get them to do whatever you want. This entire narrative is brainwashing 101. All the hallmarks are there, even the pageantry of pretending that they are actually the ones freeing people from brainwashing. Look at them project their dumb video onto all these screens like they are red-pilling the masses to wake up from their programming.
Modified monkeys. Modified monkeys?
If you haven't seen any content made by flat earthers, this is what they do too. The DI might as well be telling us about lizard Freemasons, NASA lies, and the firmament. But that's kind of the point of the DI, to deliver a message as blatantly dishonest, idiotic, and anti-science as flat earth, but do their darndest to make it look like real science. So what's the real agenda? Why spend all this time and money just to lie to people? Easy. Control. Being down with Jesus is the #1 right-wing tactic for getting people to vote against their own best interests. Don't like pesky science ruining your corporate or Christian fundamentalist agenda? No problem. Convince the people that science is evil. Science is trying to persecute you. Science says you're just a dirty, pointless ape. Don't listen to them, listen to us, and you'll never die. We've got your back, we're Team Jesus. So, what's the best way to feed people this tripe? You gotta get them while they're young.
I think that students should learn about the evidence for evolution. It should be taught. However, it should be taught objectively, where students learn about the evidence supporting it and also the evidence challenging it, and they can make up their own minds, weigh the evidence, think critically.
That's right, the old I want religion taught in science class shtick. It's astounding that we still aren't past this as a species. Sadly, the assault is happening in the scientific community as well. The DI has a tight connection with a journal called Inference, International Review of Science. On its About page, it admits to not being peer-reviewed while claiming to have no ideological, political, or religious agenda. Of course, if you have to say it. This journal was started in part by David Berlinski from the Discovery Institute, who is also seen in this Luskin video complaining about how stupid monkeys are. Here, you can see his name on the DI website and also on the Inference site. The DI has been given full access to this platform, which is why you'll find a bunch of intelligent design rubbish peppered around the site. Some scientists don't seem to be aware of this, and the journal pays unwitting scientists to publish their research in this journal to pad its credibility, which the DI then exploits to give false legitimacy to their propaganda. Fun fact, James Tour puts his inference articles about the origin of life, where he's just lying the whole time, in his list of publications on his website. It would seem like Mr. 700 Papers is taking some liberties with that number. Funny how this also makes it appear as though he's an origin of life researcher, isn't it? If you think this religious assault on science is no big deal, you really are missing the bigger picture. It represents a concerted effort to drag the world, and America in particular, back toward the theocracies of Europe that existed until the end of the 18th century. A reunification of church and state, and re-establishment of a central totalitarian authority, with the ability to persecute non-believers, which really just means any subversive individual. This is not just the plot of The Handmaid's Tale. This has happened in the real world recently, in places like Iran and Afghanistan. As a result of American imperialist foreign policy, Iran went from a social democracy to a theocracy. Such a thing could happen anywhere. It can be a bit difficult to apply the appropriate perspective in this modern era, where most of us can say absolutely anything with no legal ramifications, and live our lives as we please. This was not the case for most of human history. Humans had long been subjected to extreme brutality by those in power, which was usually a unified religious and political institution. Christianity in particular has been a violent religion since it was acquired by the Romans in the 4th century. It was imposed with blood onto people throughout Europe during the Inquisition, and again by Europeans in their colonization of Latin America. This is obviously not to say that all Christians are violent or support violence, but the coupling of religious institutions with political ones can turn any religion, even one that preaches peace and love, into a murdering machine. And by suggesting that religion be taught in public schools, the DI is trying to swing that door wide open. Our long fight to remove religion from the centers of power and relegate it to the privacy of the home is one of the greatest achievements of human civilization. To lose this is to lose our freedom. This freedom was not given to the masses willingly. It was only attained through violent uprisings. Anyone who tries to pull us back to those times must be fought tooth and nail. We may not have to cut off the heads of monarchs as we once did. The situation is not yet so dire. But if we allow religion to become science, we will have lost the first major battle, and from there it could be an avalanche. Countries like Iran serve to demonstrate that things can indeed go backwards, and also that any religion can be a tool to impose or restore a central authority. Anyway, that's the DI in a nutshell. In every video of theirs, they parade the same half dozen or so scientists that have deluded themselves into propagating this trash, which is based on either misquoting, mischaracterizing, or flat-out misunderstanding real science. While there is undoubtedly a high degree of intellectual dishonesty in their claims, likely justified in their minds by the thought of crusading for God, in listening to figures like Luskin and Tour, I have concluded that there is also a large amount of willful ignorance, hubris, and narcissism as well. This manifests itself in the delusion that they are able to tackle any area of science despite having no experience in it, and reject the conclusions of the field if inconvenient to their ideology, only to then display confusion when the scientific community does not take them seriously. Protecting their egos from the realization that they are making exclusively erroneous ideological arguments, they cry censorship and end up producing garbage content that is relegated to blog posts and YouTube, which are obviously inadequate for publishing science. They flash journal articles and pretend to tell you about them, while instead blatantly misrepresenting them. They use misleading language, and they pay their team of editors to produce flashy content so as to make it all look and sound more legitimate than it is. A well-polished turd, one must admit, but a turd nonetheless. And what do we do with turds? We flush them. So that's a small window of insight into Casey Luskin, a fraud parading as a scientist. the costume of choice for everyone at the Discovery Institute. Which one of these bozos will I expose next? You'll just have to wait and see. Until next time.